we have to evaluate the season. Obviously, you know who the head coach is going to be, pretty certain who the quarterback is going to be, so on and so forth. But, I mean, in order to move on, even if, I know McCarthy will be doing his, reviews of the breakdowns and such, but we have to start looking at, what the season was, what your roster was, those types of things. Because even on the outside, we got to get ready for draft season. We got to see what's happening in, free agency, those types of things. And getting our minds right for all of those things are necessary. And one of the places where I did want to look at was your 2023 rookie class for these Dallas Cowboys. I want to go back and look at it because, I mean, this is a team and an organization that typically finds talent pretty well. Like, their talent evaluation is usually very good.
They used to lean on that phrase. They used to say, we are a draft. We have a draft team. Or how the phrase was, have to drafting something team. I was like, you got to use more.
Draft and develop?
Draft and develop. That was it.
Yes,
that
sir.
was the phrase Stephen liked to use. We're draft and develop because they've been so successful in the draft, and they've got proof. They've got the receipts. This past year, they didn't hit a home run. I'm going to have to say the early grade, I'd give them maybe a C.
Okay, let's break it down. Obviously, it starts with your first-round pick, Mazy Smith. He became the first defensive tackle who was selected in the first round by the Cowboys since 1991.
Mm-hmm.
And he was expected to help you address the physicality issues that arose late in the season in your 2022 season, right? Especially when you got to the postseason in January, felt like, you had some issues when it came to particularly run stopping.
That was the number one thing. They've never had a real run stopper. Hankins is the closest thing they've had as far as a big butt, 350-pound, run stopping, one technique. That's all we've ever wanted.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, for years, I used to say, I wish they would just go up and get Vita Vea when he was available to be drafted.
Mm-hmm.
And I just said they would rue the day that they don't get one. And they were like, well, that's not the way this defense is built. That's not the way our defensive coordinator wants. He wants the little guys up in the middle so he can be flexible. I'm like, and the running teams will run all over you. So they finally go after one, Mazy Smith. And I actually happen to like Mazy, and I'm going to give an incomplete right now. I'm not going to give a failure grade. Well,
it's tough. Everybody's a first round. I mean, all these rookies are going to be incomplete if we do that.
Well, I'm going to say this, though. I have to say this with the caveat. I'm not saying there are a lot of people who were down on the pick because it's the same school that brought you Taco Charlton.
Sure.
I had nothing to say about that.
That's always tough when we do these schools always have Ohio State is one that people pop up with a lot where they don't produce quarterbacks. And I'm not going to do CJ Stroud is great, and he is. It just feels weird because I don't know that there would be a through line that you could absolutely attach to this school and all the quarterbacks that come out.
Again, we all know that they should have got TJ Watt. Instead, they got Taco Charlton. It had nothing to do with what school Taco went to. But back to Mazy. I'm only giving him an incomplete because I felt like I was extra harsh on the wide receiver the year before. Jalen Tolbert. Ever since he's, because again, I was upset because they traded away Amari Cooper for nothing and said, oh, we're draft and develop. We'll find another Amari Cooper. We're going to get Jalen Tolbert. I'm like, what? And then, of course, he didn't do anything but step in the neutral zone in overtime in Green Bay. And I just held that against him. I like him personally, but I was like, he can't play. He's never going to be an Amari Cooper. I hope he's a bust. And guess what? He actually got better this past offseason and actually contributed a couple of times this year. He's nowhere near Amari Cooper. He's not even Michael Gallup when Michael Gallup was in his prime.
Sure.
With that being said, I'm looking at Mazy Smith, and I looked up the numbers just like I found out about tight ends too. You look at the numbers, and tight ends and defensive tackles, generally speaking, unless they're superstars, they don't contribute right off the bat.
That is true.
They just don't.
That is
so I'm
true.
like, okay, Mazy, he's not going to contribute off the bat. And then also during the year, he was trying to catch on to the NFL game. And then he lost all this weight, which I don't know why yet.
I did want to ask you about that because it's one of those things that, online, especially Cowboys Twitter, kind of what it's referred to. Folks kept looking at him like he lost weight and he was playing 3 technique as opposed to, that big 1 technique.
Yeah.
And I understand that it probably was in some part wanting to get him on the field because, Big Bank Hank, as I like to call him, Jonathan Hankins was, manning that 1 tech.
Until he sprained that ankle.
And doing pretty damn well
Real
at it.
Good.
But it feels odd because you drafted Mazy Smith to be that big 320, 330 pound guy, and then to immediately have him lose weight, which I think some people spoke to or said up to like 30 pounds, which is a lot of weight to lose at once. Again, I'm not certain. From your perspective, being in that locker room, being able to see him, I mean, how drastic was that weight loss?
It was very drastic.
Yeah.
It was like after Thanksgiving, I didn't recognize the man. I was like, hey, that Mazy? I mean, seriously, he looked that completely different. Now, I'm sure he's not going to stay at that weight. I think they'll probably figure out some kind of off-season program because they got to get him at a size where he can, he couldn't get that first step. He just, again, and I was calling it the incomplete. We got a Tolo say, give me a break, Chris. Incomplete, come on. He was an F. I'm like, I'm not going to give him an F, but I will say this. If I have to give him a number, I'm going to just give him a D- only because I did not expect him to take Hankins' job. I thought there would be a rotation. And again, he didn't do anything wrong. It wasn't like he got run over. He just didn't help you.
I'll give him that same D, but I think that the idea of like, yes, the expectations. Well, this is the tough thing, right?
I didn't have the expectations.
You mentioned
I
Jalen
looked
Tolbert.
up the research.
Fair enough. You mentioned Jalen Tolbert. Jalen Tolbert was a third-round pick, and I'm not excusing the fact that you didn't see him in his rookie season. When you draft someone in the first round, the expectation is that they have something to be able to provide you and impact in some way. And it felt like Mazy Smith did not.
So who are the other big one techniques that were available in the first round? I'm only asking. You might not know off the top of your head. The only reason I'm saying is like I did not know who Mazy Smith was when they drafted him, but I knew his position, and I was like, okay, they finally got one years later, and it's about time. And I also looked up because everybody seemed to be, they were all disappointed because he's the same school the Taco was from. So I said, let me find out what can we expect out of this guy, because he's unheralded, so to speak. And I said, okay, they don't contribute to teams you could say first round they're supposed to do, but one techniques just don't do it unless you're Vita Vea, a top 15, top 10 pick.
Sure. And look, I even hear that, right? I think that's something that we all kind of understood.
So I just thought he'd be a rotational guy until he learned the NFL.
I think one of the things that is frustrating in the evaluation of him, even understanding that, defensive tackle, not necessarily going to impact in a big way. The things that he was supposed to be able to do, be, big and stop the run and not get moved, it felt like didn't show up as well. It felt like he also was getting moved more than you would expect. And then you weren't seeing progress when it came to the ideas of getting off the ball quickly, right? Like he still had that for a long period of time of being slow off the ball. And then also like you were hoping to see maybe some level of progression in pass rushing that didn't show up. Of course, you're not going to throw him out, after 1 year. It doesn't make sense.
That's just for this year.
But for this year,
no, he didn't help. And so I give him a D-. We got a Tolo said, shouldn't be drafting development projects in the first round. I'm with you on that. I can give the Cowboys an F. Because in other words, if you saw a Vita Vea, that, this guy's going to be climbing up, watch what happens down there at the Senior Bowl. This guy's going to climb up there, and he's the solution to our run stopping, because we don't need our safeties to be the leading tacklers. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Donovan Wilson should not have been your leading tackler. And even though he does get some get some pressure behind the line of scrimmage, you don't have a safety be your leading tackler. You want an edge rusher or you want somebody on the D-line. With that being said, I've expected them to get more of an impact player since they did hit a home run with Micah Parsons a couple of years earlier.
Well, that was your first round pick. In the second round, you made sure to draft the tight end Luke Schoonmaker. That feels really like a tough. We talked about it. You were mentioning it earlier. Tight ends are not going to impact in a big way in year one.
I'm gonna give him the same D-. And the reason and again, this is the Cowboys' fault more than it's his fault. They got a guy while he was hurt. Okay, so he's in a walking boot all through the offseason up into training camp, and then, but he's got this skill set. He's very athletic. In my mind, you already had two good ones. I'm talking about Jake Ferguson. I was already sold on Jake Ferguson when he was a rookie because I was in the locker room. I was around the guy, and I always like, this guy is just like the kind of tight end you want. I already compared him to a combo of Jason Witten and Gronk as far as that personality and being a tough SOB and calling himself the Big Biscuit. And he was basically the leader of that room, even though Dalton Schultz was there. And I was like, they got two tight ends already. I'm almost like, why are they wasting a pick on a room that's set? And again, it's not like an urgency thing. To me, you're trying to win now. You're trying to get to the NFC Championship game at the minimum. Why are you going to get another tight end when you got 2 of them already? And you knew he wasn't going to contribute the first round. They know the same things I know. Tight ends just don't, unless you're a superstar. You're not going to contribute the first year. So I was like, that's a waste. I give the Cowboys an F on that one. I'm going to give him a D minus.
I'm kind of in that same place. I know some of it you can speak to the idea of he got hurt at the end of training camp, and so that slowed him down to start.
I mean, he's walking around in a boot.
But then ultimately you get him out on the field, and he's behind Jake Ferguson, who really did grab a hold of that job in a big way. But I think more than anything, when it comes to him himself, he looks like just kind of a blocking tight end who maybe has a little bit of versatility. And so he's just going to be kind of a secondary tight end. The tough part about it, I think, for a lot of Cowboys fans, they look at the organization, they go in the second round, could you have gotten something more impactful there as opposed to Luke Schoonmaker? But he himself, I think he was just like fine, I guess, for a rookie tight end.
Here's the thing about him. You don't know yet. I mean, fans don't know is what I'm saying. But he's actually more athletic than Jake Ferguson. You just ain't seen it yet. I don't know if it's going to happen, but you already got Jake Ferguson. And here's the other part about it. Jake Ferguson and Tyler Smith had become extremely tight with the quarterback. So it would take a lot for Schoonmaker to
supplant him?
Yeah, to displace.
Yeah, and I wonder if over time Luke Schoonmaker has like the development curve, almost like Dalton Schultz. Remember, Dalton Schultz looked like as the blocking tight end to Blake Jarwin, who had broken out early.
Exactly.
And then you saw Jarwin's injuries, and then Dalton Schultz really shone forward. And so I wonder.
He looks, by the way, Dalton Schultz is down there in Houston in the playoffs, second round.
Yeah, and
he's doing fine.
He is a good tight end. I think this team was just not willing to pay him a high level. No, like he was one of the better or best tight ends in the league. But yes, with Luke Schoonmaker, I think ultimately, like a C plus. I think he was fine, but I just, I think the circumstances put him in such a place where he's not going to be an impact.
I thought they drafted a luxury item at the wrong spot. It's like, come on now.
Sure. And I think that's absolutely the place where you place the blame on that
the organization.
pick. Yeah, 100%. DeMarvion Overshown, we know what happened there.
Man, that could have been the steal.
And he looked like, for the very limited amount of play that you saw from, you started kind of seeing the visions of the impact that he could make. But you just kind of unfortunately missed that. You had Junior Fihoko as an edge that you drafted who never saw the field. Right. Just inactive or whatever.
Kind of like his cousin.
Awesome Richards saw minimal time.
I said his cousin. They're not even related. You know that?
Yeah.
He's not even related to the other Fihoko who was here, the wide receiver.
Semi Fihoko.
He's not related, but he's actually the cousin of Vita Vea. That's what's so wild. He's Vita Vea's cousin.
And so you had Awesome Richards also. Minimal time, and then Eric Scott Jr., who never saw the field, inactive the whole time. This is deep down. I know the one that was very frustrating for folks was Deuce Vaughn.
Yeah, because the reason you never saw him is because you have to have somebody that can contribute on special teams. Broadus would talk about this over and over again. It wasn't like he couldn't do anything as a running back. They couldn't have that luxury when they needed somebody to help out on special teams, and there was somebody who was better than him. And we're not talking about, in other words, he wasn't going to be returning kicks or punts like Kevontae Turpin. So he had to contribute some other way, especially. Well, he couldn't.
And he needed, honestly, I think the idea would have been if he had demonstrated himself to be pretty solid and pretty good at returning kicks and punts at like a high level. Maybe he goes out in there and he's able to take Kevontae Turpin's job in spring or in training camp. I'm caught between two sports when I keep trying to say spring training, but in training camp, then maybe he finds himself some opportunities.
No Tolos are mad at you thinking forward to the Rangers.
I don't think anybody you understand where I am, Tolos.
But back to
I think that would have been his opportunity.
That would have been his
opportunity,
but here's Kevontae Turpin coming off a Pro Bowl.
Sure.
And so he hadn't done anything wrong to lose his job.
No.
And they actually wanted to use Deuce Vaughn as a running back because in the first two games you saw them try to use him as a running back. It didn't work out, but then they could not afford the luxury of having him on the roster and not being able to contribute at any time.
Yeah, and that speaks to also just the poor nature of your running game all the way across.
And one other note about Overshown, again, that could have been the steal of the draft. But what kills me about the organization, again, you knew you were down a linebacker. You knew LVE gets hurt all the time, even much more so than Tyron Smith, right? How in the world you don't bolster that roster, fortify that team at the trade deadline, knowing you needed some linebackers, and just say, oh, Vershawn, not helping you this year. You're trying to go to the NFC Championship game. That's what makes me angry.
So rounding out the back end of your draft class, you had Jalen Brooks, who kind of, he suited up a few times. But I think maybe the guy who looked pretty good at the back end of your draft, TJ Bass.
Yes.
Who looks like he's going to be a solid backup lineman for you.
Depth on that offensive line, yeah. He did a good job filling in, especially late in December when he had some injuries and sickness that nobody saw coming.
But you talk about it, it's probably your last 2 draft picks that you might have the most general positivity for your draft class over this past season. Ultimately, it really was a failure of a draft class for the rookie year.
Especially considering the standards of a draft and development team. I said it.
Absolutely. The standards of the draft and development team, also the stakes that your team was at. This was a team that wanted to win now, and you didn't have anybody that came in and gave you a noticeable impact on this team, especially with a team that, you have players at the very top taking a lot of money. Young contributors are what you need. And so last year you didn't get that. You hope that those guys can develop in and maybe give you some contributions. And this year you've got to maybe have a eye towards getting talent that can give you a little bit of contribution earlier this season.